Laughing. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Radical Ready Live.
Good
Here
afternoon.
with my brother, Patrick Riley, for those of you who might not know. Hey, Pat. What's
Hey,
up?
how's it going, Dan?
You know, it's
Um,
it's it's going well.
it's I'm doing okay. You're not too far away from me. Just I know we have some regular
Every now and then.
guests now, but Dan and I are actually about 20 feet apart. Dan's in like we have sort of a conference room. He gets the cool backdrop, and I'm kind of relegated to the white wall behind me because that's just the way it worked out.
Well, I'm not, Phil might, our guest today might not like the fact that your backdrop is a Tuscaloosa
Well, that's
poster.
true. That's true.
So I don't know. It's pretty cool. You're gonna, you'll,
Yeah.
you'll be punished for that statement.
Yeah.
Um, well, we have a lot of new people joining us today because we're talking about a really cool film and we're bringing on a really awesome human being. So, welcome to all of our new guests. And so this format's simple. We're going to have a fun conversation. We're going to try to entertain you. If you have questions, we do our best to keep an eye on them on the right hand corner. It says, say something nice. It doesn't have to be nice, it can be not so nice.
It could
We
be
will do our,
provocative.
it can be provocative. It can be uncomfortable. It's a part of our tagline. So yeah, so just sit back, watch it, or dive into the conversation, and we're going to be bringing on Phil Harder in a moment. We will give an intro, the proper intro for him. But first, I just kind of want to set up what we're going to be talking about today. Um, so, so Pat and I, and he goes by Pat at least because he's my brother, but I think he's Patrick to some people, like Philip is Philip to some people, but I call him Phil too. We're going to be talking about the concept of creative leadership and how do you make the impossible possible, right? And Pat and I have spent a lot of our lives in music world, building startup companies, um, you know, technology, film, and you name it, there's always something extraordinarily challenging you need to work through. And so, how do you push things forward? Right? How do you change things? How do you push the status quo? How do you bring radical ideas to life? So ultimately, how do you make the impossible possible? And what we've learned in our hypotheses is one of the most common elements to this is creative leadership. And Pat, I just want to give you kind of my thoughts around the definition, and then pass it over to you. So um, when we talk about creative leadership, a few words come to mind, and that's being extraordinarily passionate, right? Being extraordinarily humble, being authentic, being having high levels of empathy, right? These are attributes that are absolutely necessary, and it's also creating a safe place for your team. And when I say safe place, and for those who are working around you, I mean emotionally, and a safe place with ideas. So kind of I break it down into three things. Great leaders have a clear vision, but they also collaborate and are extraordinarily authentic. Great leaders know what they want, right? And Phil's is a great example of that. He has a vision, he has an idea, he's making a music video, a film. He knows the story he wants to tell, but he's also willing to take ideas, right, and say, that's better, that's awesome, let's go, let's do it. So those are the second attribute, and the third is creative leadership. And great leaders also rarely take no for an answer, right? And they empower and inspire people around them to find a way. Like no, we got to do this. This is what we set out to accomplish. How are we going to get there? And if you inspire people around you, it's amazing what you can accomplish. So, that's the way I want to set up. That's the conversation. That'll be the theme of today. We're going to have a lot of fun, tell a lot of fun stories about the making of Tuscaloosa. But with that, Pat, tell us what you think about creative leadership, and maybe set up Tuscaloosa for us too, as you were the producer on it and spent 2 years of your life dedicated to this incredible
Yeah.
movie.
Well, you really described it well, creative leadership, Dan. And I was thinking, beyond some of the things you said in terms of what it feels like to be a creative leader, and I'd be curious to get Phil's insight into this. But you have to be comfortable, continually comfortable in spaces of enormous ambiguity. And that's can be a really hard space to hold. And I think that's why some of the best creative leaders, they're somewhat rare. I think there's skills that I think people can develop, but a lot of this is talent too. because you just literally have to be comfortable just holding that space of ambiguity, coupled with like a real clear North Star, a vision of what you're moving toward. And then sort of that third part you said is having the skill and talent to be able to kind of lead a team confidently through that. And there's a lot of, attributes that creative leaders have, and you described a lot of those really, really well. So, in terms of what I hope we learn through this conversation today, and this is really how you opened up your conversation or your thoughts, Dan, is it's fascinating to me how creative leaders work and what those skills are, and we've seen it, across industry. This is not just a creative industry thing only. I mean, we've seen incredible creative leaders in tech, and not surprisingly, many great technical leaders who are great. They have equal parts engineering minds, but a lot of them also have, we learned this in Modern Survey, they tend to be musicians, or there seems to
Right,
be another
artists,
part of their brain,
artists of
or
some,
artists.
yeah.
And that's sort of it's that kind of technical engineering brain, coupled with, it's sort of again, a comfort and ambiguity, or for that creative space. And it's that point of intersection is really interesting to me. And I think that's one of those things that we'll explore today, because they're really ultimately these are skills and capabilities that are applicable to anything that we're trying to do in life.
Yeah.
The experience I had with Philip, and we'll jump into this, is for me personally, I was coming off of doing basically 20 years in a tech startup. I guess it was, yeah, I guess by the time we finished with Aon, it was all, let's just call it 20 years. And, I jumped over to basically producing a movie, and it was, many things were familiar to me. But also many things were just completely new and different. And, Philip was an incredible partner in that journey ahead, as we kind of found a way to both kind of lead with a vision, but then also I kind of found myself in more of that technical role. I had to be sort of like a lot of the backstop as a producer
Right.
to Phil's incredible creative vision. But I think that is, maybe we'll get to that a little bit. I think that's a good part of partnership, and when you have a creative leader who's really got a vision, but they really need sort of a foil a little bit, to help give them some boundaries and edges, so that energy can kind of move towards things that actually get done too.
Ooh,
So
there might be some good
talk about that.
stories we're gonna have to hear about that.
Oh,
Did
we'll
you have
see.
to wrestle Phil's ideas down to the ground?
No, the problem with Philip is that he endlessly has incredible ideas. It's really
The
challenging.
problem with Philip. That sounds like a very good movie title. The problem with Philip.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we should start working on it. So, Pat, you bring up one thing that was, I think, so important, and it's that North Star, and it's that purpose, right? Whether you're making a movie, you're starting a company, or whether it's just you're going to work every day, it's just having a clear purpose and feeling connected to what you're working on, right? I mean, that gets the best of us. I mean, if we have a personal connection with it, and we believe in what we're doing, we believe in the outcome of what we're doing, and we believe in the change of what we're doing, right? We'll make an impact, and we're going to talk about social impact and the importance of that. It just empowers people, and I know, watching you and Phil work in this movie, um, while it was storytelling and entertainment, it's the movie business. It's also an incredibly important story, around social impact, and we will get into that, today. And so we have a lot of people joining. So, thank you. And I just want to just give a quick, setup again. I'm Dan Riley. This is Pat Riley. A lot of people joined in the past few minutes. Co-founder of RADICL, and we're talking about creative leadership, and we're talking about, where I was, lucky enough to be executive producer on the film Tuscaloosa, and Pat was producer, which meant he was living and breathing it, and Phil was, director, and wrote the screen adaptation from the book, Tuscaloosa. And, it was just an incredible 3-year project, and we also did some incredible things, like shooting the majority of the movie in 2 weeks, right? And this is when we talk about making the impossible possible. How do you do that, right? It takes incredible courage, it takes incredible focus, and it takes an incredible team, and a team that's inspired. So that's really the focus of today, because we can apply this to anything we do, any walk of life. Inspiring people around you to do incredible things and make the impossible possible is the purpose of today's conversation. So, without further ado, Pat, I want to maybe hand it over to you to introduce Philip, because he has an incredible resume, and we're very lucky to have him on the show today.
Yeah, so I don't have his bio in front of me, but I think it's pretty well ingrained.
Should be in your
I've
head.
known, should be in my head by now. So I've known Phil for, gosh, I'm going to say 25, probably, well, 20 to 25 years, somewhere in there. I, first met Phil through, friends of friends, artist friends here in Minneapolis. But as we'll learn, Phil is one of the sort of the beginning of the music video sort of begins with Philip. And in the mid to late 80s, he started making music videos initially for a lot of punk rock bands. And then as MTV started to explode and his early videos started to show up on MTV, he soon became an in-demand music video director. He spent the next sort of 10 to 15 years of his career just, I think he shot, maybe he can tell us, 300 music videos, 400. I mean, just it's a
Yeah.
fairly enormous amount for eventually some of the biggest acts in the industry, everyone from Prince and the Foo Fighters and everyone in between. And many of his music videos were breakthrough. He brought a lot of animation and energetic visual style to the work he did. And then that's naturally sort of segued into doing a lot of commercial work as well after that. So he was doing Apple iPod spots and spots for HP and many other big time spots as well. But as
Yeah.
Phil will tell us, he's always wanted to be, his dream though through all of that has always been to be a feature film director. So Tuscaloosa was an opportunity that he and I
Yes.
were able to come together on to find to collaborate. We started this movie about, like you said, about three or 4 years ago, and it was
Yeah.
released almost exactly a year ago here in North America, and now it's being released throughout the world over the next year.
It's exciting. And Pat, I'm just going to quickly read other bands that he's done videos for. So you named a few. I'm just going to quickly name them off because it's an impressive list. It gets me excited. Prince, Foo Fighters, Incubus, The Script, Rob Thomas, Liz Phair, Babes in Toyland, especially those who are in Minneapolis and know them well. Low, Trampled by Turtles, Pulp, The Cranberries, Bare Naked Ladies, Matchbox 20. So these are humongous bands, and like you said, Pat, Phil was doing this in a time when music videos were really about storytelling, and creating the almost film story on top of music. And I think we've videos have changed now. It's not quite like what it was, and Phil was really leading the way there. And as far as other organizations he's worked with in the commercial side, so the Gap and Target and Advil, Gerber, Disney, Hewlett Packard, Apple, like we talked about, Sprint. So he has been around the block a few times. So now that we've embarrassed him and set him up to be a god, I guess we should bring him on. And good. And again, so I love the turnout today. This is awesome. And people I know are all around the globe that I'm seeing. So I will say this one more time. If you have questions along the way, anything you want to ask, put into the comment box and we will answer it as best we can. So I'm bringing you on, Phil. You should have an invite coming your way. We will dive into conversation. So Philip should be on in a moment. Elsa, thanks for joining us again. When music videos were authentic short, yes, they were. I know, and actually, I think that was Phil's. I think Phil always thought about it. We can ask him this as a short film. I mean, it wasn't just about the band playing in a basement, right? Those are cool sometimes, but he always added just a very creative layer to it. So absolutely. How do you get
Oh,
in? So Phil, you should have an invite. Um, it says you've accepted and connecting. So you know what? I might remove it and I'll re-invite you. Let's try that. So you should get something on your screen, invite on screen. Technology at its best, everybody. All right, Phil, so you should be getting an invite to come in.
there we go.
There we go.
Magic.
Magic. There he is.
Welcome, Phil.
All right, let's get right into it.
Let's dive into it. All right, tell us about yourself, Phil, now that we've, set you up so well.
Well, I'm not going to repeat what you said because that was really charming. It makes me think about, you listed off this like amazing resume, but I also think through my head like all the the down spots between all of that stuff, you know, like, oh, I can't get a job, I can't get arrested, I'm out of fashion, music videos turn into commercials, but there's a gap there. You know, how am I going to pay the mortgage? So there's all these really ups and downs in my entire adult life of freelance filmmaking. Um, you guys earlier, you said, well, tell stories. And so I'm thinking of stories. And I remember when my son Otto was maybe in junior high or whatever, and I was in between like careers, so to speak. You know, I was not in fashion for music videos as much as I used to be, but I was still about to get into commercials. And he's like, Dad, why don't you make those big music videos anymore? All that big money is coming in. What's going on, Dad? And I'm like, look, man, we got a really nice house. We did all these things. And I funded this on being essentially an artist. So don't give me any shit, you know? And but it's always reinventing yourself, and that's what I had to do because you know how it was. Music videos used to be played on MTV, and when that market um, dissolved basically through the invent of the things like YouTube, there was no need for MTV anymore. And all the labels fired all their video commissioners, budgets went down, and I was essentially out of a job. It went from like one year it was $500,000 videos. Now I don't make 500,000, that's the whole budget. And then it went in one year down to 100, and all of a sudden it was down to like 10, 15, 20. And I was like, whoa, you know, that's a change. Fortunately, I got right into commercials, met some great people at Bob Industries in LA. And because of my resume with music videos, I got right into the cool commercials that were really sought after. But I was doing quirky stuff, graphics. And at this time, the commercial industry was interested in my what I thought was really old videos already, like this corner shop video where the band comes to life on record covers. Well, that was like 3 years old, 4 years old by then. And I'm like, really? You want to do that in commercials? That's really old, out of date stuff. And they're like, for them, it was new, you know? Let's make the target like graphic-y thing and use your style. And I'm like, okay, how much you pay? Holy shit. Oh, let's do it. You know?
I'm in.
And it was really interesting to go from 3-minute stories. I mean, all those music videos are stories. Maybe a couple are, you know, which I dig actually. Like one of my earliest music videos, Naked Reagan, 1987, I believe, a Chicago punk band. It was just nothing but performance shot on a Super 8 black and white camera. And I learned right then and there that this little Super 8 camera has this amazing look. It's called film. And I'm like, film is cool. And it looks like punk rock. Black and white Super 8 looks like punk rock. Before that, Rick Fuller and I were doing stuff on like TV video cameras at 30 frames a second, looks like soap opera. And we were doing everything to degrade it. Like we were doing big black and these things, and we just couldn't get there. I bought a $6 Super 8 camera, shot it on black and white. I didn't touch it. I was like, this is it. And then Rick Fuller and I bought a 16 millimeter camera from a high school that was a used news camera. And I made probably 100 music videos on that camera. I had a camera, I could travel. And with my band touring, I quickly learned, even though I was living in Minneapolis doing freelance gigs and learning as I earned, I quickly learned that I got to go international. The bands I love, they're not like, you know, doing a couple shows in Minneapolis. They're touring. I was touring. So I reached out as fast as I could to a national level and eventually an international level. And I've kept that ethic ever since.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's awesome. And I will say one thing. One of the words I used when we talked about creative leadership in the beginning was being humble. And the way Phil kicked this off was being humble at its best. The first thing he went to is it was actually hard as shit having to do what I did for
Yeah.
for 20 years, because it was always about reinventing yourself. And I think Phil, that's what's given you such a long career in this is you would always be willing to sort of look at yourself and say, I need to reinvent what I'm doing. I'm not just going to do something from time to time, something that'll pay the bills. Yes. But ultimately your passion and your vision was always about something greater, doing something that's going to truly be, be around a change, be around a movement. And that leads us to Tuscaloosa, because I know, this is your first full length feature, and I was so proud to be executive producing this. but you and Pat did the, we talked about making the impossible, or making the impossible possible, and you guys did it with an incredible team. So I guess my first question for both of you, and Phil, I'll start with you, is I know you shot the majority of the film in 2 weeks. How do you rally up? How do you do that and keep the team breathing and inspired and focused on the mission and the purpose of what you're trying to create?
Well, as I was saying, I think I'm going to coin a new term. It's going to be called a humble braggart. Okay. So I'll boast about being humble. A director has to champion their work, and there's times when I just gave up. The phone wasn't ringing, and I wasn't championing my work, and I could tell. I've tried to make Tuscaloosa a few times. It would die on the vine. And then this third try, because I spoke with Patrick, actually Isabel, my wife, talked to Jennifer, his wife, and she gave her a hint. Hey, Patrick's looking to do something after his selling his company. And I'm like, ding, ding, ding. God damn, we got to find somebody with money somehow, and somebody who's got organizing skills and all this stuff. And here's somebody I know who's not just some distant Hollywood person. And so championing your movie, I would not say no. And there was times where, Patrick, if you recall, you're like, oh boy, this is kind of rocky. It's 2-week production schedule with a 2-week pre-pro. We can't do this. And I got on with Scott Franklin, who was a producer with Aronofsky, who was executive producing Tuscaloosa. He goes, don't say no. If anybody says no right now, you lose your cast, you lose your location, it won't happen. You go back in that office and say, we're going to do it. We're going to do it for all this reason, and that reason. And I was hanging with a friend last night, having a few beers, and I told some Prince stories because you guys said, hey, make it fun. So let's make it fun with a Prince story. So Prince had this guy, his handler named Takuma, and Prince on a whim would not, we did a video together, but on a whim he would cancel the biggest live show that's supposed to be in Dublin with, months of planning. He'd be, I don't feel like it. And he just would cancel. And the night we were in New York getting ready to shoot him in a studio with green screen for all these effects, everything was set for days, massive amounts of crew was coming. Prince doesn't care if he loses money, he'll cancel. And they said the night before, Takumi called me and said, Prince is going to cancel. He doesn't feel it. He's doing tours, he's tired, he's doing shows the night before, night after. But you got to get on the phone with him and tell him everything that is going on with this video and how great it's going to be, and don't let him talk. And I'm like, really? And I'm like, yes, so I'm going to put you through now. And so you always have to go through like 3 layers of handlers before he goes, hey, what's going on? And I'm like, oh, we're here in New York. We got the green screen studio. We got all these people. We've done all the testing. It's a really amazing animated piece. We got the artists. We got the wardrobe. We got the equipment. We're scheduled. We're casting. Yeah. What time do you want me there? 8 o'clock. Oh boy. Okay. And after that, I learned so much about how he works, and I took some of that. He relies on other people. He does his homework, and he relies on other people to help him make his vision. Let's say he's not an animator. He's not graphics person, but he looks for people. He has his ear to the ground. He looks for people who can do that well, and then he inspires them. And he pushed me and pushed me and pushed me. He looked at all my work. He knew it really well. I was like really surprised. I'm like, wow, Rick Fuller and I did this together. It's like he must have studied our work. And then when I present these ideas, he goes, well, that thing you did with Incubus. I'm like, okay, can you do that, but change it and do it in a new way, and then push it, and then make the story really radical. It's about Middle East prejudice against Middle Eastern people after 9/11. And it's about a girl, the song is about a girl who commits his quote unquote, how do you call it? Jihad? I went, holy shit. And then I remembered, don't swear in front of Prince. And he's like, he got kind of stung. He didn't like swear words for some reason. But anyway, he pushed it. And the whole process, he kept pushing me more and more and more. And I remembered that. And then when we made Tuscaloosa, I would try to push everybody else that way. Like, you're really good. Mark Wojan, you do sets. You're really good at what you do. Can you do it? Can you build a barbecue hut out of nothing? Props, even down to the grips. Like, Jeff Villers, can you dig a hole and plant a light post in the middle of the field? Yeah, can do that. Great, because I know you could, because I worked with you before and you have my back. So surround yourself with really great people and just be radical. I don't mean that way, but be radical in your thoughts and don't say no. You can't be a milquetoast. You really have to attack this industry. Yeah. And for music videos, when I write ideas, I get turned down probably 25 times, and then I get one. And that's hard, It's like constantly beat up. So you build a thick skin. But then you take those ideas and rework them, and eventually it lands, and eventually you're off to the races.
Yeah. And just to pick up on that, the other side of that. So Phil, I remember that kind of that moment when I was, as a new producer to a project and feeling really nervous for a lot of different reasons, because we barely had the financing, we barely had the plan. We did have the actors, we did, and I knew we had an incredible team, so pieces were there. But for me as a tech CEO, is usually used to operating with a little less risk, but what was interesting is, so it was at that moment, it was like easy for me to just say, you know what, this just isn't right. But there was two things that happened in that moment when you came to me with that, because I remember that conversation with you. One was, I could see the passion that you had, I could see the belief that you had, and behind that, as we know with hindsight, there was truth in that. Like, the timing was right. We did have the right actors. There was a way to get this done. We didn't necessarily know the answers. But the other piece is, and this is an interesting dynamic, is it may have been easier for me to say no. It was harder for me to say yes, but that yes ended up being, for me and for the project, the right decision at that point, right? So it took those two moments, you as the kind of creative leader, queuing up the opportunity, the vision, the idea, and the passion, and then the team and capabilities. And then in that particular instance, I was sort of like the, I guess, final decision maker to give the thing a green light. But there needed to be something there. There's something for me there personally, because it was a journey was about to open up for me that I didn't even necessarily know. But with hindsight, that was all the right things, right? And when we hear the incredible stories of the past, about when breakthrough moments happen with teams, that's oftentimes what that dynamic is like. There's plenty of reasons why we should have said no. But then there's that creative leader who, Steve Jobs, whoever it is, who's just like, no, you guys can't quite see it yet. There's something big here, but it's in my bones as an artist. I can bring it to life.
Imagine if we didn't make it, we'd be sitting here talking about nothing right now.
It'd be Seinfeld, the show about nothing.
Maybe some people would prefer that. Shut up about Tuscaloosa already, Phil Harder.
It's funny, Pat. I remember when you were going through that decision-making process. I was in London, actually. I remember you calling. I'm like, we had been an hour conversation about this. Should we make it? Should we not? We have to replicate Alabama and Minnesota, so timing's not on our side because the leagues are getting ready to change, and we have the cast. And if we do, it was just you were battling with this. And then I remember we just had this conversation around, look, Phil's in, we're ready. He's so passionate about it. You and I were passionate about it. And that's maybe when you asked, do you want to be an executive producer? I'm like, yes, I'm in, let's do this. And then I remember there was just this, all of a sudden, it was that switch that like, we're doing this. Yeah. And as a leader, once you make that decision, we're doing this, you're going. And that is important. And like Phil, like you said, I mean, that is, you have to stay focused on what your North Star is, your vision, your journey, and then you inspire people around you to get the work done. And who would have guessed and who would have known that some of the best ideas around creative leadership came from Prince? This is a pretty exciting day so this is breaking news. This is breaking news today.
I had heard that, his shoots were a shit show, and it was, oh God, he'll call you up in the middle of the night and stuff. And it was nothing, that was so far from the truth. His his shoots were so inspiring. Um, I completely disagreed with what people said about working with Prince. Um, he was just so inspiring. I couldn't believe it, you know. He would he would say things like, for one thing, I was there was a woman blows herself up in an airport, and we're at the shoot, and I go, Prince, there's this one concept thing I want you to do. It was written into the concept, and he didn't say no at the time. And then I said, okay, we're shooting this thing now. Basically, you're going to put, I was thinking of like Wim Wenders' Wings of Desire kind of thing. Heady, you know, you're going to put your hand on this woman's shoulder just before she's about to blow up her belt of bombs, you know. And I go, and we're all ready to shoot it. We had a test person. He goes, oh, I don't want to do that. And I'm thinking, well, that's the end of the video. You know, what do you mean you don't want to do it? And he told me really clearly, you know, the reason I don't want to do that is people will take it that I had something to do with this or I had the decision. And for me, it's way too weighty. I just don't want to do it. And he gave me a very clear answer. And I'm like, okay, cut that scene. And that also taught me, like, try to give clear answers about reasons why you're doing things and reasons why you're not.
And explain them, right? Explain them to
yeah. And that's leadership. You want to talk about leadership. Are you kidding? You know, I've been around so many leaders and I've tried to learn from them all the time. Al Milgram, you know, crazy guy around the film festival, crazy leader because he was so spastic, but he's also a leader. He would like get his young volunteers to go and put this film festival together like a shit show, but he got it out there and people went to see that film festival and he did it for years. Into his 90s. I mean, talk about a leader and a radical leader, as in, what? You know, nobody knows what's going on, and somehow he pulls it all together last minute. You know, there's different styles of leadership.
Yeah. So, what's something that happened on set in the 2 week period when you guys were, you know, again, making the impossible possible, and you had to make decisions like that, Phil? I got to cut the scene. We got to add to the scene. You know, are there any stories during those 2 weeks of the making of Tuscaloosa where, you know, it was really hard for you, it was challenging, and how did you manage people through it and get it done? What stands out?
Well, I think of a story right now. Danny Nevitt, who's in New York, I don't know if he's on, but he said, hey, this weekend I smoked my first legal weed in New York, and I watched Tuscaloosa a year after release, you know, because we did the COVID release. And he goes, oh my God, I remember how we shot these extra scenes. Just Danny, Theo Stanley, the DP, and I. We shot them on our day off, and we shot it with the huge rap star YG and his bodyguard. And I think Eric Helgeson, one of our other executive producers, was there too. And his friend Eli drove him. And we realized while shooting that the white guy, Billy, and his white girlfriend get all the story, the backstory, the love, all this stuff. But the black characters do not get as much backstory. And we thought when we went into this, oh, this script is tight. And then you start to realize, why do the white people get all the emotions and the feelings and the hopes and the dreams? And our black characters, like YG's character, who was just on a motorcycle and was barely mentioned, he's the character who gets killed by the police. And I'm like, that guy needs a backstory. And so we took our day off. We went, Jeff Villers came with us. God, thanks for Jeff Villers. He helped us make this movie like crazy. Lit it up because it was in between days, and this barbecue hut that we had built was ready to go, Christmas lights and everything. We lit it up. We got a campfire going, and I think we gave YG a couple free tickets to the Packers-Vikings game, which he didn't wake up in time enough to go see. Anyway, he drove out there, and we did this story, and I was writing it. Danny Nevitt and I were writing it as we went. I looked up 1970s interviews with black African-American soldiers in Vietnam, and we quoted them. They were like rapping. They were so cool. It was an old record, actually, with a BBC newscaster. And these guys had the rap thing going, you know, because they were stuck there, and they were talking about the racism of these what the soldiers went through in 1971, and this depicts 1972. And I started feeding YG these lines. I had written them on a cardboard piece of paper that day, and I'm saying it out loud, and I say it in your own words, YG, because he doesn't have time to learn the script. And so I say something like, you ever know what it's like to blowtorch a woman and watch her scream and burn, And he's like, motherfucking, you ever know what it's motherfucking like to blow to? And he's just doing it like that. And it's like, whoa, this is so cool. The backstory, the backstory, the backstory. And we created this scene with 3-person crew and Jeff Biller's 4-person crew and a couple extras around a campfire. And I'm so glad we were able to, maybe a small budget film could actually do that. I'm not sure, but we were able to adjust. And I'm so glad we got that material. And now the film had balance. It had much more balance. And it can be a really slippery, dangerous slope when you're dealing with issues that are now like Black Lives Matter. And of course, as that accidentally fell into this whole George Floyd thing. We didn't know when we shot the movie, of course, that any of that was going to be coming. But when we released it in March 13th, 2020, 2 months later, we shut down because this stuff happened in Minneapolis. We just shut down like, man, we cannot look like we're exploiting the situation for profit. So we shut down our release. And we waited a couple months till we felt a little more comfortable. And then we decided, you know what? We can't be shy about this. We can't be timid. We have to come out and say, yes, we shot this before the horrible incident of George Floyd, but it happens to speak about those issues. And let's just say it as it is. And I think that's why it's great to try to choose stories. Filmmaking is so hard anyway. You might as well do a story that has some meaning to it. And it doesn't have to be political or whatever, but it just reach deeper because you're going to get one chance probably if you're lucky. Make that a meaningful story to tell that can inspire others beyond just the entertainment level. We have plenty of entertainment level. Here today, gone tomorrow. I remember films that influenced me like Antonioni, Kurosawa, Tarkovsky. Those films resonated and sustained long after they ended for me. They still play in my head for years later. No way could I be at the artist level of those poets of cinema, but I hope that Tuscaloosa can sustain beyond the end credits.
Pat, go ahead.
No, actually, Dan, you jump in.
Well, I think that's thanks for sharing all that. And I think, with that, I think it's a great time to transition to, the power of storytelling and specifically the importance of, making a stance and our commitment to social impact and change, and that it takes one story at a time, right? One act of kindness at a time. It's not going to change overnight, but it's so Phil, as you know, Pat and I work in corporate America. We help organizations build a great culture, and one of the biggest challenges that we're facing right now is how do we really make sustained change, right? So if we believe in something, we want to make sure it's not just the thought of the day or the fad of the day, or that sounds good, and let's put out a press release and say the right thing, but then we just fall back into our old habits because we're more comfortable there, right? So this story tackles, and you just described it, racism, white privilege, police brutality. It tackles all of that. And, tell me a little bit about what that meant to you. It's obviously you wanted to make a film. It was beautifully shot, all the above, but you also wanted to focus on social impact and change. So how did you go back and forth in your head with that? Because that's I know so important to you, Phil, and was such an important part of this movie.
Hey, let me jump in for just a second before you answer that, Phil. Just building on that, Dan, and what Phil was saying before, it's like we have one life. We have, maybe if we're lucky, we get a set of careers. But what are those choices and decisions we make where we're going to focus our energy towards things that are meaningful? And, as Phil described, I mean, the entertainment industry is huge. It's broad. There's all kinds of things out there. And, you know, so if you're going to do an independent film, if you're going to, as a filmmaking team, it's like, well, let's make sure we do something that is meaningful and does sort of fits into a purpose in terms of being part of the conversation. Hopefully, the kind of the broader conversation that's happening around complicated things, and also energetically, where does it come from as a creator? And as you were saying that, Dan, I was remembering that when I first read this script, there was two or three things that just really landed with me. And again, this is in that power of story. One was the first thing that landed with me, and this is more from our family history, is sort of that what I would describe as the power of mythology in families and how those things move down from generation to generation, both as sort of how we define ourselves, and then also sort of even the trauma that's handed down generation after generation. To me, that's an interesting kind of point of story. And then the other part that really resonated with me is really white privilege, and when Phil and I got into this, started really looking at the story together. I don't even know if we used that term at that time, Phil, but it was just starting to bubble up in the sort of the discourse, of the world around us as we were making the movie. Because what happens in this film is so interesting because it sets up this idea of sort of like, I would say, the trope, which is the white savior trope. It sort of sets it. We kind of think we're heading that way, but then it flips on its head, and that whole convention is challenged. And to me, that was that powerful moment in a story of when hopefully everyone that sees this movie has that learning moment together. So it's like, whoa, we all just experienced that understanding, that insight in the context of story, and that I just wanted to kind of set that up a little bit as how story works. And Phil, I'd love for you, I'll just hand the baton over to you.
Well, I always remember the novel, and I read the novel, Glasgow Phillips' novel, and I know Glasgow, and I couldn't tell how it was going to end. And when it did get to the ending, which I won't reveal right now in case you haven't seen the movie, I couldn't predict it. And I thought, that's a cool idea. And it's not about the obvious racism is bad, which we learned when we were 6, although maybe people don't remember that lesson. But it was about white privilege. And so you've got this character, Billy, played by Devin Bostick, just fantastic actor. I mean, he plays the cool dude, privilege all around him, but he's this liberal rebel in the early 70s. But you got to think, the cool dude smokes pot, good looking, sunglasses. He must be the hero. And he meets this young woman, Natalia Dyer, who plays Virginia. She's young 20s, playing an 18-year-old, just unbelievable acting. And they actually met right behind me and started rehearsing in my house while we were doing location scouting 2 days before the movie. And they were going through, and I remember we'd always go for beers, and Devin would say, "Oh my God, it's like playing tennis with a pro. I'm rehearsing with Natalia, and I realize I got to up my game. She's fantastic." And they create this energy. But you can't predict quite, in traditional terms, hey, there's the cool guy. He must be the hero. And that's what I loved about the novel, and I tried to put that into the movie as much as possible. Like, look at that cool dude. He's radical, he's checking out things, he's questioning things, but he's not the hero, and you're going to discover that in the movie. Then you have his father, the doctor, the good doctor, educated psychiatrist living in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, played by Tate Donovan. I talked to Tate Donovan. He was the first person we cast. And he goes, "I like this because you can't tell I'm the villain. It's not like you're tobacco chewing racist." And so he plays it like he said in some of our interviews we did that you can't play this role as a racist. That's dangerous for an actor. I had to play it like I'm a loving father. I care for my son. I don't know I'm a racist, And then in the end of the movie for him, through his acting, again, I'm not going to give it away, something is revealed. Like he sees a light bulb or a really depressing situation that he's in because of this world around Tuscaloosa. And Virginia, she's the wild card. She's the only person in our story who's thrown into this institution. Everybody else knows each other. Families, as you said, multi-generational families. Grandfather of Nigel, our lead black character, has worked for the family as a gardener all these years. Billy takes a summer job as his boss. He knows nothing about gardening. Virginia is institutionalized against her will in the early 70s because oh, I'm not going to give that away either. All right. So she's institutionalized against her will, and she's the wild card. And that's where all these stories gel. She is this firecracker that Billy falls for and has to keep. If he wants to keep her is the wrong word. If he wants to keep up with her, he's got to hold on for this wild ride. And she starts kind of like a victim, but she's not. She's hiding her victim. She's actually a badass. And those are the story elements and the layers that I thought made for a rich movie. And that's from the novel, you know. That's just the novel. And now we translate all that. And I can't explain why I fell in love with that novel, except for it aged very well for me over the years when I couldn't make it. One time we had it cast. Darren Aronofsky was producing it. Evan Rachel Wood was playing Virginia. Joseph Gordon-Levitt was playing Billy. And Nick Stahl was playing Nigel. And it didn't happen. And big tears are coming down my cheeks. But somehow we made it happen later. And a new batch of young people came in and kicked ass on it. And we used this amazing Minneapolis film crew, everybody I know, everyone I know, surrounding myself with people I trust. And then you guys and Eric Helgeson believed in me, and we did it. And one last story about that. A few filmmakers, Grips or whatever, they give this kind of grumpy, maybe it's from the days of grumpy old men. They give this, oh, that was a shit show. Whoa, we did that in 2 weeks. We barely got paid, blah, blah, blah. And I heard it 2, 3, 4 times from Grips and people in the business, you know, that get kind of jaded. Yeah, I got to talk to you about that. That was really a shit show. And I'm like, you guys, independent movies are a shit show. How the hell do you think we're going to make this for very little money in 2 weeks? Of course it's a shit show. So stop saying it's a shit show. Unless you get grumpy old men to return to Minneapolis with a multi-million-dollar budget and everything you possibly need, it's going to be a shit show. So don't tell me that it's a shit show because you make me feel bad. Just, you know, glad we did it. Sorry you got paid $100 a day, but it's the best we could do. And thank you, because you spilled blood for us.
You still kick that.
But don't call it a shit show, because every independent music video, every big budget music video, every commercial, every single shoot I did is a fog of war shit show.
That's, you know, that, I mean, as we relate that to teamwork and like, that's exactly, there's always going to be people on the team, right, who are just like, I don't want to do this. It's not good enough. I thought it was going to be something different. But again, you know, Phil, like you said, it's staying true to what you started, your purpose, and letting people know how you feel too, right? That's excuse me, that level of authenticity, and that builds trust. And once you build trust across a team, you know, that opens up opportunity for a team to just be so much more, you know, more functioning and just do awesome and incredible things together. So that's a great story. Pat, so a question for you. I know there's one story, and Phil probably wants to jump in on this one too. As producer, you've told a few times, there's some stunt car and motorcycle shots in the film, and I believe you guys had a hell of a night. I think I was traveling, hearing the stories, and I think somebody's on the line here, Pat. I think Chris Reese is joining us.
Oh yeah, he's actually
and he was a part of the savior. So I just love that story. If you could tell that, because that is, to me, such an example of just bringing great people together. You thought it was over. You thought you're going to have to cancel a night shoot. You had people flying in from LA, but I just love that story. So tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I'll try and give a crisp version of it. And it starts with the part with story. So as Phil and I were working through, in the team, we're working through the edit. You know, we had shot most of the movie in the fall, and then we were working through the edit through the next spring and into the early summer, and just trying to get the movie to work. And we were, you know, having test audiences look at it. And even though we shot this, you know, remarkable movie in 2 weeks, we started to learn there were sort of some holes. So basically, the story wasn't working the way we thought it should be working. And there was just moments when the characters were talking about something that happened, but we didn't see it. And so Phil and I devised this idea that we said, you know what, we need to show the audience what happens. We need to kind of introduce this big scene. And we realized we could do it all with stunt drivers. We could kind of invent this whole thing without bringing the actors back. So that was great as an idea. And then so we brought in the stunt coordinator from LA. This it was just great. And then we brought in a stunt driver, and we brought in a stunt bike. What's the term? Motorcycle stunt driver as well. And these guys were all like top shelf, stunt people. So, and we designed the whole team. The stunt team helped us kind of figure out how to shoot it and all the blocking and all of that, which is great. But there was one key thing we needed to make all this work, which was a motorcycle. And so, there's not a lot of stunts that are done in the Twin Cities because it's just not that kind of town. So we had a kind of a, let's just call it more of almost like a prop motorcycle. It's one that we had used earlier when we shot, but as it turned out, when we got the stunt guys here and they were looking at the motorcycle for safety, and this is like, the afternoon before we were shooting, like the fork was broken. They couldn't get the motorcycle started. It was like all these things. They're like, there's no way that we're going to get this thing started. And there's certainly no way we're going to do any stunts on this. Like we're going to die on this thing if we're operating it. So this is like, this is like 2 p.m. or something. And our shoot was starting at 6 p.m. that night. And Phil and I realized we didn't have a motorcycle. So we're like, just went into complete panic mode. And we're just like, where can we need a vintage, basically, like a little Yamaha motorcycle, like a 1970 motorcycle in 3 hours. So we just started to work through our network and working through our friends, trying to find somebody. And then I think, and I remember having this moment, like you said, Dan, I was in the backyard at the house, and this is about 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. and the shoot's about to start in about 2 hours. And we've got literally, a whole crew coming, stunt people. Everyone just assumes there's going to be a motorcycle, but it's like, but we don't have a motorcycle. And I had this moment where it was like, I failed. Like I have failed this we cannot, this seems to be an impossible, there's just no solution to this. And then Phil, through his magic, I think you were texting frantically the way Phil does, and he found a friend of a brother-in-law or a friend's brother-in-law, something like that, had this kind of perfect bike, and we managed to find it. But then we still had all these, then it was like 90 minutes to go before the shoot. We still had all these logistics things. We're trying to get me and Phil to set and the crew and everything. And then I needed to find a way to get this motorcycle delivered to set. And that's where Chris Reese comes in. So I called Chris, he's at his house. He's literally like making dinner for his family. And I call him up. It's like, man, I just need a major favor. I need it now. I need you to help me get these 2 motorcycles to this setup in Vadnais Heights, Minnesota. And he's like, okay, when do you need help? I was like, in 20 minutes or 30 minutes. He's like, whoa. He's like, okay, I'll be there. And so he showed up and took care of the motorcycles. But it's that, it's the magic of friends and network and community and just finding a way to get to the impossible. But yeah, for me as a producer, that was that. It went from a day of recognized failure to, and all of a sudden like a little green shoot opens up. There's a way for it, and then you find it. And then it ended up being, I remember after that night, like just this incredible night of movie making, and we got the incredible scenes that ended up making the movie. But it took that last little inch we had to cross to get to the hallowed ground of filmmaking. Yeah.
And don't forget, Pat, the motorcycle we had shot with YG was a 1968 Yamaha Yellow. It was from Billy Japp, Good Karma. And it was yellow with a really cool chrome round thing on the gas tank. So it was completely identified in a ton of scenes in the movie. Now we have to get that motorcycle to do stunts. And the motorcycle I got was a 1970 Honda Orange. And so we had a motorcycle that was vintage, but it was a completely different motorcycle. And Mark Wojan and Elizabeth and those guys said, instant solution, get yellow vinyl and coat all the orange parts with yellow and put a big fake, chrome looking insignia on it and make sure that motorcycle goes really fast so you can't quite tell. And then we rolled the original bike out there, which wasn't running, with a broken fork, and we lay it on its side, and we do the close-ups on that. We kick the start with that, so it's all established. And then the dude gets on this 400 bike, with the other one was, I think, a Yamaha 80, believe it or not, but it was tall and looked the right size. And he'd be flying, racing the freight train, a live freight train that we're shooting, going, here comes a train, go! Ah! And I remember too that I was talking about stunts with him on the phone. I'm like, okay, this guy's got to die. We don't know how it happens. It's not described in the book. It's just the way we shot the film. And I go, let's have him like plow. He's being chased by the cops. Let's have him plow into a tree. And they were like, no, you don't have time, money, nada. What do we do? What do we do? And they said, well, we could do this. I remember I wasn't even in the car, but Theo Stanley was in the car, and we had this guy, Tony Poppenfuss, who played the cop. He would reach out with a rubber billy club and whack the stunt guy, on the back of his leather jacket with this fake billy club, and that guy would veer off to the side as if he crashed, and we add a sound, and that was our trick to create a stunt. And then he laid there in the grass, all beat up and dead, and all this stuff, and that's how we were able to pull that one off.
I love that story. That's like, that pretty much sums up, the creative leadership, right? I mean, just being connected, not giving up, never saying no, right? I mean, like that story of what you guys pulled off, everyone rose to the occasion because they believed in the film, right? They believed in you guys as leaders. There was friendships. And that's how you make the impossible possible, right? I know that's one of many, many, many stories, but I love that story, and so yeah, thanks for sharing that. Well, we're about like 2 or 3 minutes, so I do want to first of all thank you, Phil. It was so much fun, and I'm sensing from the number of people who stayed on the line from the very beginning and stayed on the line. I don't know why I call it the line. I'm like I must be very old school. I'm going to keep calling it the line, though. I'm going to bring it back. This was great, inspirational. I love the stories that you shared, and I think this just reminds us the importance of purpose, the importance of staying humble, right? Being empathetic, inspiring people around you, whether you're part of a team, whether you're a leader, whether you want to become a leader. I mean, these stories we can take with us in anything we do, whether we're working in a kitchen and we run a kitchen staff, or whether we're working in corporate America, or whether we're making movies. All this stuff is all about just people working with people, and how do we get the best of those around us. So I love these stories. Phil, how do people watch the movie? Because I suspect you built a lot of hype. What's the best way?
Well, Apple TV has it. Amazon, if you have an Amazon Prime, you can actually watch it for free as part of your package. Or you come over to my place after COVID, and we'll just watch it and tell good stories.
I love it. Everyone's invited. There it is.
Yeah.
Party at Phil's house.
Well, we missed out the year due to COVID, and we didn't get to project it. So we're actually looking at trying to do some screenings, like we'll call it post-COVID screenings when it's safe. And we're looking at trying to do some screenings in the area. We already have some works, and we really want to show it in its big, huge, beautiful format, the way we saw it in one of our test screenings at the Walker for the crew. It was a private event, but we saw it for the very first time, surround sound, the whole thing, and I'm really hoping we can do that. And it's also playing at many festivals still, but they're not in the area. But if you look it up, you'll find maybe a festival near you.
Yeah, but beyond that,
just to note.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and beyond Amazon Prime too, you can find Tuscaloosa on all the major digital platforms out there for rent or for purchase, and it's also now available. I know we've got a worldwide audience. It's also available in the UK under a different title. It's called The Summer of '72 in the UK, and it's on all the major digital platforms there. And it's going to be releasing into other markets as well over the year around the world. So look for it.
Great. Good. Well, thank you guys. Awesome conversation. Thank you to this awesome community. If you have questions after the fact, do let us know. Again, thank you, Phil. Really appreciate it. This was awesome. This was fun. You kept it fun.
It's just like farming. It's a shit show. And that's where I grew up, farming. You're always behind the 8 ball. The clouds are coming in. Nothing works. You got to go fix something and find a solution. Otherwise, you don't get the crop in, you don't have any food for the cattle, and they die, and you end up like the Depression, in a dust bowl.
Hey, I
Yeah.
was just before we wrap up, I know we're almost top of the hour. A question just came in. What's next, Philip, for projects for you
Oh,
at the
Yes.
last?
sorry, we're working on editing the Baron von Raschke movie, Dan Brzezinski. I see your question. Um, Baron von Raschke, professional wrestler, The Claw. We edited this movie during COVID. It was something to do during our downtime, and we shot our last scene yesterday at the sample room with the daughter of Baron von Raschke, Heidi Raschke, and we're gonna jam that into our film that's already edited because she said a whole bunch of cool things. And then we're also working on a script. I can't say what it is yet, but it has to do with Japanese subject matter. There's some internment camp issues that go along with that. It's a gangster movie, so that's way down the road. It's an inkling of an idea. And some other really cool movie ideas that they're in the seeds, as every filmmaker has a seed of an idea that hopefully we can bring to fruition.
Awesome. Well, we'll continue to share all these with the community as they happen and they come out. Thank you guys. Thanks to the community. We went a little bit over, but have an awesome Thursday. And thanks again, Phil.
Yep. Thanks, Phil.
Bye-bye.
See ya.